Welcome to ReStories, a podcast dedicated to the people behind retail. In each episode, we sit down with leaders, builders, and changemakers from across the retail industry to explore the stories that shape their careers, the decisions, the challenges, and defining moments along the way. Recorded from the Restore for Retail studios in Sydney, ReStories is a space for reflection, connection, and community. This is ReStories.
Well, g'day. I'm sitting down with one of the coolest guys in retail, the coolest guys I know, in fact. So over the last week, I reached out to a bunch of his LinkedIn network and asked them what they thought. And here's what they came back with. Lach is the king of people skills and networking. He always goes the extra mile. He was basically raised in retail. He knows how to drive a strong brand and culture. His passion for people and product is second to none. So today we're going to unpack all of that, the people skills, the culture building, the product passion, and the leadership. Lachlan Ashton, mate, welcome to ReStories.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
So when you hear those quotes, what comes to mind?
I think raised in retail it actually probably couldn't be put any better, to be honest. Since I was so young, coming into the game, it's been everything I've been surrounded by for the last, 15 or so years. Coolest person in the game is crazy. I mean, I'd love to say that I believe that, but I'll take the compliment for sure.
Amazing. So, raised in retail. So tell us where you got your start. How did you get into the industry?
So it was funny. I stumbled across my local surf shop, City Beach, when I was 16, continuously shopping there. My mum actually handed my resume in whilst I was at school. So she landed me a Christmas casual role.
Secretly?
Yeah, so it was wild. The first day, I think I was 13 and a half or 14. Mum had to sign a form to actually let me work there. I rocked up with purple hair, I think I had both my eyebrows pierced. The fit was terrible, thinking back now, but that's how I got my foot in the door. And I stayed in City Beach then for, I think, 5 or so years, all through my schooling, schooling life. And yeah, that's how I kind of kicked off and got into it. So
from those early years, what do you think, what did you learn early? What have you had to unlearn since?
I think when I started, it was always going to be this is what I'll do for now. And I think a lot of people, when they step into retail at such a young age, they think, I'll pop in while I'm at school, earn my weekend money or whatever it may be. And then I'll go to uni and I'll go on to do my career. I jumped in straight away. And I think within the first, say 4 or 5 years, I realized that this is a space that I'm comfortable in. My personal skill sets kind of matched the job required. And yeah, I think from then it was just history. I went in very, trigger happy. I was so excited to try everything and just be the best. Very quickly learned that I wasn't. So I think my biggest learning early on was probably that I needed people to show me. I needed to, stop, take a step back, and I guess just take on the skills from those around me.
So thinking back to, 14-year-old Lachie or 13-and-a-half-year-old Lachie, what advice would you give to yourself back there? I
think the biggest piece of advice would probably just be to slow down, just kind of lap up what was, it was a really enjoyable time, but not, take things so seriously or so to heart. I was getting feedback continuously. I was so young, so, I would rock up late to every second shift. I would call in sick for shifts if I wasn't feeling it on the day or whatever it may be. And I think maybe back then taking it a little bit more seriously from the jump probably would be the feedback that I'd give myself for sure.
I love it. So, when I canvassed your network and asked them to describe you and how you go about things, I couldn't believe the amount of people, basically everyone, came back with, such a strong people leader, people skills through the roof. So tell me about where that comes from. How did that come about? Is that just natural or?
I think it's funny that it was continuously referenced as well. I find it, a skill that I'm continuously trying to sharpen. It's one of those things that I don't think that you can master, in the industry or as a person anyway. So, I just took on the advice from my peers, the people working around me, above me, my team below me or whatever it may be. And I think that was probably where I got my version of, leading a team. It's little parts of everything that I captured from my previous leaders.
So talking about that, someone's listening out there, you've got some tips, some hints. How do they strengthen that strength, and how do they improve and get good at that?
I think the biggest thing for me was early on in my career, I thought that my success was my success, and me being good at what I was doing or whatever it may be. That was the end goal. I needed to be seen as the best in the industry or the best in my field, but I very quickly realized that you're only as good as your team. So the biggest thing that I would say to anyone coming up through leadership at the moment is you are only as good as your team. So, if there's someone within the team that you need to get, upskilled or whatever it may be, invest the time, because ultimately their success is yours as well. I think that's probably the biggest thing for me is just take on the advice that you can get from your peers, people that have been through it before, people in your life that may not necessarily be in the industry that can teach you things. And I've just taken little snippets from all the industry leaders that I've worked with. And I think ultimately that is my leadership style. It's a combination of everyone.
So you're at City Beach, in your teens. Like, tell us about that next step. Where did you go from there, or how did you sort of move out of that first role and move up from there?
So I think I just worked my way from Christmas casual. Obviously, I got kept on, which was one of the best moments in my career. I got the notice to say that I'd be staying on as a permanent casual after that 2-month period. And I think for me, it was just working my way up the ranks. I worked all my high school life at City Beach, so Thursday nights, Sundays. I was packing the thong crates. I was standing at the door greeting everyone. I was doing just the basic stuff, but I would say yes to every opportunity. So I'm working 50 minutes away from my house. I'm going, interstate if they ask me to go interstate at periods of time through holidays to go work. And I just said yes to everything. And I think for me, that was probably, my hunger just got, bigger. I wanted to do more. I wanted to be full-time manager. I wanted to be the best in this business or this industry. So I went from casual. I finished school. I went full-time, I'd say the week after I finished high school. And I think that was, for me, kind of when it all kind of clicked that this is where I'm going to stay. This is what I want to do. I worked the shop floor at a full-time capacity as a sales assistant. I got my first department manager role. So I was running a department. The responsibilities that were involved in that, I think for me was a bit of a shock. There was analysis, there was data, there was a team underneath me that I had to manage. And that was a bit of a shake-up.
Yeah, you hadn't had exposure to that. You're
honestly,
like, oh, this is different.
It was just a different life for me. And I think, I just continued to kind of go up the ranks from there. So moving from far north Brisbane all the way into the city, into the flagship shop. And that was a big moment for me. I was running into people from the office. All of a sudden I had connections that I was building directly with brands, and brand reps coming in. And that for me was probably, again, it was just one of those things where I'm like, I want to be one of those people. I want to work for a brand. I want to kind of, just work my way through the industry, meet all these people and have those relationships. So I went, casual, into full-time, into a department manager, into an assistant manager, to the point then where I was running my own stores for City Beach, which was, again, it was really hard. The learnings that I had to do along the way, it was significantly harder than what I maybe anticipated to be. But I did a couple of years of running shops for City Beach, and then was adamant that I was going to be a buyer. I was, I saw the glamour. I saw the walking through the shops with the team, going through the products, going through the lookbooks. They got me to go to some of the showings with them, and I just thought, this is it. This is the life. This is the high life of retail. I was very grateful. They put me into a short-term 3-month stint in the buying office. Very quickly realized that I can't sit down from 9 to 5 every single day. It's not all glamour. There's data, there's a lot of numbers, there's more metrics around it. And I did my stint and then very quickly shuffled back to the shop floor. So I went back to the shop, and went straight back into leadership. Since then, obviously I went to Glue Store. So went to Glue Store as a department manager, took a significant step back, which was great, I think, in hindsight. Looking back, I was probably quite junior as a store manager, and they said, come on board, but we're going to kind of build you up from the ground again. And I essentially just reset, everything that I learned through City Beach, I had to learn again. Different kind of, different responsibilities, different system, different way of customer service, etc. So I think for me, it was a big kind of change and switch up, but I fell in love with Glue, within the first month of working there. I knew that I'd stay there for a long time, and I think collectively, I did almost 10 years with the business, and that's where I've learnt everything that I know today.
Yeah, I want to get into the cultural side of the differences there. But through my role, I'm super lucky to talk to different people in the retail industry and leaders in particular. And one of the key traits that I think I find that runs through it is the people that have built themselves up and gone through a series of roles on the rise are such more well-rounded, deeply empathetic for the individuals in their team. So, is that what you find, having, done all, risen up and done all those roles?
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things where if you lead a team but you don't know how to do the role that one of the team members is doing, then you can't successfully kind of lead that person or that individual. So I think for me, it was just a really nice kind of way of learning every single part. And then once I got to a capacity where I was able to kind of guide them and coach them through their role, I felt more confident. They probably felt more confident knowing that their leader had done this before. And that's a big thing for me as well. I'm never going to ask someone to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And that's something that I picked up from almost every single leader.
Yep.
So if that meant that I vacuumed the floor so that my department manager could, get some more display shoes from the back because we were running late to open, I'll vacuum the floor, and I think just stuff like that, it resonated. And that's what I really liked when I was coming up through retail as well, is knowing that the person above me knew how to do my role, could help me if I got stuck, and would coach and guide me to get to the next level.
And so thinking about that change, City Beach and Glue, and so culturally, what sort of differences did you find across those businesses and future businesses, and what sort of role do you think culture plays in a retail business or a retail brand?
I think what I can respect so much about City Beach is they're a business that stays true to their DNA. They've never changed. Obviously like function-wise and, facility-wise and store count, etc. has all changed. But you go into their stores, you still feel the same energy you felt 10 years ago with their business. And they kind of breed that through people that work for the business as well. Like I grew up with the brand, so I felt like that was all I knew. So the way of greeting people, asking people for the additional add-ons at the counter, etc., like that was all just in my general kind of conversation. And that was fun. But I think for me, maybe in City Beach, I was probably too young to understand kind of, culturally what they were building or what they were doing. Once I stepped into Glue, it was like, this is business. It went from, it's fun to go there and, open the shop and meet heaps of cool people and, sell clothing, to what are you selling today? How are you selling it? This is what we're going to do. These are the priorities, and it was just a little bit more structured. And I think that was probably the biggest shift for me. It went from a business that I had known since I was a kid to, I don't know this business. I've now got to, very quickly pick up how things operate.
Yep.
But I think generally speaking, in terms of the communication that you got from your leaders, the office, it was pretty similar, and I'd like to think that most businesses have the same kind of vibe. But like you mentioned at the very start, culture is, probably one of the most talked about things in our industry. So I know that it varies, depending and the business to business, but I didn't see a massive cultural change. It was probably just me changing myself.
When you think about the current Australian retail environment, who's doing things really well? Like, what brands do you think doing well, and what is it that they're doing well?
I think there's probably two different parts. Me personally, I really like the Australian brands at the moment that are coming up and just have an online store that have now branched out into brick and mortar, like Earl's Collection have just opened a store in Paddington. Louis, who runs that brand, is probably one of the most humble kind of brand owners that I've ever met. Ex-football player, brings his whole kind of history of, his life into the brand through the collections. And again, you walk into the store, everyone that works there is a part of his family. It's a family unit. And I think that there's brands like that probably need to break through, but it is quite an expensive adventure to go on. And it's a very risky one to go on as well. You sign a 5-year lease with someone as a business that's working online, very quickly you realize that the overheads to having an actual store are quite significant. But I think the other side of things would be fast fashion, fast to trend retailers that are just coming in and getting stock on the shelves the day after it gets big through social media.
Yep.
I look at Universal having whatever the percentage may be, it might be like 80% vertical brands within the business or whatever it may be. So they can just shift and pivot and move without any kind of, I guess, repercussions. They can mark everything down by 50% for a day. They're still going to make their margins. It's not brand damaging because it's in and out. They only put a couple of everything on the floor, sells out, they move on to the one that's going to drop next week. And I think Universal, to me, in that fast to market environment.
Yeah, velocity of retail. Yeah,
is incredible, and also even Glassons as well. Glassons, I think, just from an outsider looking in, it just looks like one of those businesses that you just see continuously shift, change, seasonal, window change, or the store feels different every single 2 weeks. But then the other one is definitely JD Sports. Like, you look at what they built and how it started to where it is now, and you can't help but, I guess, have respect for the way that they've done it, because they stayed true to structure. They stayed true to DNA. Their business is the business from the UK, except it's obviously got their spin on it in the country. And I think that's just a machine. Like, it looks like a powerhouse. The leaders that they have in there, and the managers, the teams, the training that they do, it's probably second to none in our country.
Yeah, and when I think of those brands you call out, the way that their brand and their culture are like together, the people in the frontline retailer, store associate, the store manager, the area regionals, they live it. They talk it in the way that they speak. The stores look great. The way that they're behaving, what they're doing is it's all one, and it's incredible to see. So I love those brands. Shout out to those brands. Good retail customers. Awesome. I know you're a huge sneaker man. It's a big part of your life. Tell us about where you fell in love with sneakers, how you got into it.
So I think for me, it probably started with skateboarding. So I grew up as a skater. Every pro that, I followed all released a shoe, I'd say, every 3 months. So what I was doing was just continuously buying new shoes. Whatever they were wearing, I wanted to wear. You want to look like, your idols. So it started with skateboarding, and then it kind of just developed into I can get my hands on, rarer shoes. I wanted to be seen in shoes that no one else was wearing, so that I was unique and it was, my identity. That very quickly snowballed into me having 50 pairs of shoes and a full room in my house to sneakers. And I think the sneaker game back when I started, which was, give or take 15 years ago, the community was so tight. It was so loving. It didn't matter who you were, where you came from. Everyone was accepted. You could walk into a Foot Locker for a raffle, and I was making best friends with dudes that had kids my age. I was making friends with people that had absolutely nothing else connecting them to me except for their love for sneakers. And I've built what could be, some of my closest friends through that connection. When I landed in Sydney 10 years ago after moving from Queensland, my only friends here were people that I'd met on sneaker forums, at campouts where we slept in the streets of Sydney City for a release the next day. And I think I'll forever just love it. I was always been a collector, so Pokemon cards or, whatever it may be, Yu-Gi-Oh cards growing up, and I just wanted to have a series or a collection. I don't know if that's a healthy habit to have, but it makes it very expensive if I want to dive into anything. But yeah, I think for me, the sneaker kind of culture and environment is just all accepting. And that's why I love it so much as well.
Yeah, it's the thing about collections is, no matter what collection you're into, it's going to be expensive.
Of course.
Amazing. So I want to get into the current sort of retail industry and your thoughts on, the current state of the economy, really, how that's looking. And then I want to go into trends. But, firstly, obviously, coming up to Christmas, peak times, but, give me some thoughts on the current state of retail in Australia and, how you're feeling about that at the moment.
I think the last couple of years have probably been, some of the hardest years for retail in Australia. And I would say that from my perspective and from the feedback that I've gotten from, the other people in the business, the industry. But you've just got to be constantly changing. You can't just sit in idle and expect that people are going to come into your store and purchase things. We're now in a position where the industry or the customers, they want things right then and there. If they see a trend that's coming, they want to see it the next day, and I think right now we're just it's a customer-led industry. You're doing everything to service the individual walking through. You can't be too proud or, you've got to be able to continuously change. I think it's really hard because it's not like old retail. I think a lot of people in the industry now are referencing old retail prior to COVID as you could open a shop and as long as you had product on the shop floor, you'd make money. Right now, you've really got to squeeze for everything. Yep. The industry the last couple of weeks has probably been quite frustrating in the sense of we're in a big discount culture at the moment, and you have to be. There's businesses racing to get the biggest piece of the pie going into the busy period, and that means launching a week earlier than their competitors.
Yep.
And then their competitors want to launch a week earlier than that. And then all of a sudden, where Black Friday starts the last week of October, and I think for me, that's quite tough, because then all of a sudden for those businesses that aren't working on the 70, 80 margins, they can't do that. They can't afford to do it. So yeah, I think right now it's really hard. It's really one of those, just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
And then if it sticks, you've probably got 2 weeks.
Double down
and
on
then
it.
continue to keep throwing stuff.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think I can say that for most people in the industry at the moment. It's a bit of a scramble. And those that are winning, they've got the best product. They've got the best environment, the best kind of store setup, locations. They present really well through marketing, through socials, and all encompassing, they look like they're winning.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a grind at the moment. Absolutely.
And so, I want to get into trends looking forward, but, thinking back through your career, what have you seen come and go? I'm obviously in tech, so I love, what's on the sales floor, handhelds and all the things. But, can you think back to, starting out to now, what have you seen, evolving in retail?
I think it's funny. Australia, I'll talk on behalf of men's fashion in particular, but men's fashion, when I started in the industry in Australia, was, we were very slow. So I feel like everyone had a chance to kind of catch trends and know they had a 12-month leeway before it was going to hit our country or hit our shores, or until people were happy or comfortable to try and risk it. So that's changed a lot in the last couple of years in particular. You've got, if someone steps out onto the street in whatever it may be, a 3/4 pair of shorts in a high sock and loafers, 10 years ago, not one person in Australia would be comfortable doing that. They'd have to be that absolute pointy, the edgiest kind of consumer to do that. And now I feel like if someone drops one of those shorts, you're going to see 3 or 4 people every day, kind of running that fit. The funniest things, probably more recently than ever, was like the Labubu craze, which as a business, we rode that for the last 12 months. We were one of the first kind of early adopters of bringing Labubu into the country, and that's absolutely kind of snowballed into one of the biggest movements. And I think I always reference like the Beanie Baby thing, or, back in the day, even collectors for Pokemon cards and stuff like that. Like, this is the same exact thing, except it's on steroids. It's so much bigger than what people probably even realize in our country. Internationally, it's I don't know, you have to respect it, right? So one of those things, but it came in and then we all kind of sat around waiting for it to drop off.
Yeah.
We did it for the first 2 months and we went, okay, well, what's the next thing? And then we saw the sales continue to rise. And then I think it was like Kim Kardashian and a bunch of celebrities all posted in like the same week. And then it was like our online sales were ding, ding, ding. Our phones were blowing up. We've never had that many online orders ever in the history of our business. And that was crazy. But then after that, we were like, well, it's going to finish. This is just a trend. It's a fad. It's going to move on. And now we're 12 months in and we're still, it'll be in our top 3 revenue drivers as a category for us. So yeah, that's probably been the funniest thing that's kind of come through.
So how do you spot that trend? You spoke to me, I remember speaking to you, probably a year or 2 ago now, and you were talking about Crocs before they sort of kicked off and how you spotted that. So how do you spot a trend and then obviously, capitalizing on it and exploding through it?
So I think for me, a lot of my inspiration or what I'm looking for is through socials. So it'll be through Instagram, through TikTok, through Pinterest, or generally just word of mouth. If I hear something referenced multiple times from other people in the industry or, whatever it may be, I straight away will clue on and I'll piece that together and go, all of a sudden something's going to happen.
Yep.
There's going to be Crocs is a big one, but then it was the Crocs are boring. Everyone's got them.
Yep.
How can we customize them, make them our own? So the gibbets or whatever the little kind of fidgety accessories are. I heard so many people talking about these before they even kind of got huge. And for me, it's just looking forward and trying to see where it clicks. If I generally hear it a couple of times, I'll start looking for it. And then if I see a couple of people jump on board, then I'll know it's probably going to get a lot bigger.
Yeah.
And you're going to be looking for those tastemakers, like those people throughout socials that, generally speaking, are ahead of the trend, or the brands just strategically gifted them stock to put it out into the market. But a lot of things that I've jumped on that I thought were going to be huge haven't been huge. But some of the ones that land when they stick, it's game changing for a business or for a buyer or someone that's kind of, trend forecasting for sure.
So you're at Glue, you're there, and now, tell us about the Good Kid and how you made that transition and what you're doing now.
Yep. So I was at Glue for, like I said, almost 10 years. I'd gone to the markets. I was selling some of my old season stock at the markets just to kind of clear my cupboard out to make space. I had met Michael, the business owner for the Good Kid. We started talking. He bought a bunch of the stock that I was selling at the markets to then put it in his market stall, which at the time was the Good Kid market stall, which he had vintage. We got talking about the industry and kind of what was happening, and then he said he wanted to open a shop. He's got enough loyal kind of clientele and customers coming through on a regular basis that he's probably comfortable to have a space that they can come to not only just on Saturdays for the markets. We stayed in touch, and I think it was maybe a year or so after he hit me up and was like, we've got a shop. I'm about to open a second one. Business is absolutely booming, but I need someone to come on board and kind of give us a hand in building out, legitimizing the business itself. So I just wanted to jump in there with my experience through the industry and, put some stuff in place so there was structure. We knew generally what a day-to-day was going to look like. And then, we're 2 years deep into the Good Kid at the moment. And it's been a whirlwind, stepping out of a big corporate multi-brand retailer into a standalone, self-owned. The team was 4 when I jumped on board business, but it was a step off the cliff that I think I was ready to do. I wanted to try something a little bit different. And then, I essentially jumped on board, and I've used everything I've learned along my journey in my current role, whether it be buying wholesale and kind of money mapping, budgeting and planning, hiring, recruiting, sales, training. All this stuff is my role at the moment. So it's a bit of everything because there's no one else to do it.
It's almost as if you're using everything from your previous roles and skills, and this is your chance to just explode on it. Yeah,
I think so. And I think just having something different every day. So, it might be a Monday and I'll go and open a shop and I'll work the shop floor for the first couple of hours. But then on a Tuesday, it's going to a brand office and meeting the boys and going through a collection that we're going to purchase into for the following year. It's understanding more around paid advertising and what an impact it can make, and, a whole different realm of the industry that I had no kind of exposure to whilst I was in brick and mortar. So, I think at the moment it's just my role is everything, and I wouldn't change it for the world.
Yeah. Keeps it so interesting and, never a dull moment in retail. So we'll close and we'll think about that. But, thinking back through your career, what are you most proud of? Would be the first part of the question. The second question would be, for someone early on their retail journey, what's one bit of advice that you'd share?
So I think for me, my proudest thing would be my team, and it always will be. It's the people that worked alongside me as I was coming up. It's the people that now, to this day, are doing some of the biggest things in our industry. Some of the people that work directly underneath me will now be the next wave of senior leaders through our industry for the next 10 or so years. And I think that's really exciting for me because I was there for their journey. I guided them through whatever it was that they were going through at the time. And I'm not a proud leader. I'll always try and give them little bits and pieces. If they're in a position where they've kind of mastered the craft to an extent and they want something more, they want to become a multi-site manager, they want more exposure to analytics or the product side or whatever it may be, I was one of those leaders that would just give them little pieces so that they were learning more. And I think that's a big thing for me. And probably the answer to the second question is you have to be continuously learning. You can't just think that you've mastered the craft because you can't. It's not a thing that you can just get to the ceiling and then you win. People management is one of the hardest things you can do. Day one, you're a counselor. Day 2, you're a motivator. Day 3, you're, whatever it may be, you've got people crying to you, celebrating wins with them, whether it be, professionally or personally. And you're a big part of someone's life, whether you know that or not. And I think now looking back, some of the people that were there in my early days in the career, they're still, to me, some of the most important people.
Yeah. I mean, network's so important, and you've shown, and we've talked a lot about the people skills. It's not just about people that work for you or the people directly above you. It's your whole network, and that's such a strength of yours. So, Lachie, thank you so much for sharing your story. It's been a great chat. You've really shown that how authentic a leader you are just in the chat. So, thank you so much for that. For anyone listening, if you're not following Lachie on his socials, I mean, Lachie X Ashton
that's it
on Instagram, but I'm sure you're on TikTok and some other things as well.
Yep.
That are too cool for me. But this has been ReStories. So thanks for listening, everyone, and thanks, Lachie.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys.